Hi, I'm ED-SKaR, and this is Hlaine Mad Larkin, Tanith sniper from the original founding of the Tanith First, later known as the Tanith First and Only, or Gaunt's Ghosts. And that nickname is particularly relevant with Larkin because Larkin is the one credited with coming up with the Gaunt's Ghosts nickname. This model is one of the 2002 set of Gaunt's Ghosts models that I got all those many years ago and didn't really get around to painting properly, and so recently I've stripped them down and started from scratch. As he's featured in the named character set, you'll be unsurprised to find out that he's one of the main characters of the series, popping up over and over again alongside his trusty friend Bragg. At least, at first. Larkin has some, shall we say, questionable mental disability of some description that's never fully explained, and it's theorised that the only reason why he even managed to pass muster was that someone convinced the recruiting officer that Larkin was a good enough shot to warrant the problems that come along with that. One such incident, very early on actually, I believe in the second book, Ghostmaker, had Larkin actually desert his post because of his problems. And he managed to find himself inside an imperial chapel of some description, where he began to have a conversation with one of the statues. Now, whether this is a psychotic episode or a visitation from the Emperor is never fully explored. However, after wrapping the barrel of his long lass in a scrap of material that the angel ripped from its skirts, Larkin was able to take a shot from the window of the chapel and hit the enemy commander, which, in some reports that I've read, was 4 kilometers away, which is an exceptional shot to be certain, even with a direct laser weapon. Now, touching on to the paint scheme for a moment, the uniform of the Tanith First and Only is of course black, so that's a fair choice, and most of the other colours are fairly obvious as well, and I'll start the camo cloak with a base of dark green. Now at the moment I'm only treating the camo cloak as a flat colour, but I'll paint in the camouflage scheme later on. Now the vast majority of this model is done with 2 colours in each section, so for example the black uniform has a black and a grey for highlighting, and all of the green bits are a dark green and a light green, and I'm base coating everything with the darker colour and then bringing in that lighter colour, mixing it together and doing some basic highlighting. I'm not an expert at any of this, I'm not using any fancy techniques, I'm kind of mixing in sort of wet blending, sort of layered highlights, sort of glazing, but only when I water my paints too much. Just using the skills that I have to try and make it look at least passable. The cloak is going to actually be rather important to paint as well as I can. I've had this sort of problem with several kind of hunched over or leaning forwards or charging forwards models, where the front of the torso ends up pointing slightly downwards, and sometimes even the face is pointing slightly downwards to get that pose, and the pose looks really good when seen from the level, but when you look down on it on a tabletop, which is the way that you would usually look at a model when you're actually using it, all you can see is the top of the head or the back. Now that's less of an issue for a display model, and given that this model will probably spend most of its life on a shelf realistically, that's probably not an unreasonable part of this model in this case, but I thought I'd just quickly mention that. Another interesting part of this model is the fabric wrap around the barrel, and there were several choices that I could have made with this. The first is obvious for the story that I mentioned earlier, and that is to paint it as a brilliant white to be reminiscent of the fabric of an angel's robe or skirts. The other option that I've seen done fairly well is to paint it the same scheme as the camo cloak, having that camouflage pattern, and that does tend to look fairly good. But while I was deciding how to paint it, I was actually just going ahead and painting it, and I'd actually finished it by the time I'd made the decision. And the way I've painted it is kind of a white, but a really dirty, grubby, has been on there for a while, picked up lots of dust and mud kind of white. So you could almost see this as the fabric from the angel, or you could see this as just any material that's been wrapped around to support the barrel against various barricades used as barrel supports. And along with the skin, this is again the simple 2-colour painting that I've been doing. this time in lighter Caucasian skin tones, because the Tanith people are fairly pale skinned. This time with the skin, unlike Dorden that I've done previously, I get to use the blue for the tattoos. Mad Larkin, of course, has a distinctive tattoo around one eye, and it's also assumed that he would have many other tattoos, as most of the Tanith do. And Doc Dorden was never mentioned as ever having a tattoo, so I put quite a few tattoos on Larkin to make up for that. And now finally onto the camouflage scheme of the cloak. And this technique rests on highlighting the green first. So having the folds highlighted here is going to define where I put my highlights of the other colours. Each of these different colours is again 2 different colours. I'll put a little oval of the darker colour, and wherever there's highlights in the green that I've painted over, I'll put a highlight in that colour as well. And hopefully that means that all of these highlights will blend together at least somewhat and not look too out of place, and hopefully bring the whole thing together. So the colours I've got are black and grey, dark brown and light brown, an ochre and a sand, and then I'm also splotching in a little bit of lighter green just in places to make it seem like there's other shades of green in there as well. And there we go, Mad Larks is fully painted. As with Dorden, I haven't painted the base yet, as I'll be doing basing for the whole set together. With this model in particular, the camo cloak is quite important because Larkin here is leaning forwards. And I mentioned with Dorden and the dwarf I posted some time ago that a model leaning forwards can be very difficult to make look good on the gaming field because you can't see the face, you can't always see most of the body from the front, and you end up with the good view of it being from the back and seeing the camo cloak. In the case of Mad Larkin here, I think I did passably. So I can give him a quick clear coat, pop him up on the shelf next to Dorden, and that leaves me to say I'm ED-SKaR, always will be, and thank you very much for watching.